This is our fifth video in the queue of our 10 modern decks that we would play right now in this metagame, and as you can see, we have Affinity in front of us. And Affinity has been a deck pretty much since the beginning of Modern and hasn't really changed a ton or moved around at all. But there are a couple different versions, and we're running the more burn version with like Galvanic Blast and Shrapnel Blast, and the blue version runs what is it, Thoughtcast, Sasha?
Yeah, Thoughtcast and Master of Ethereum.
Yeah, Master of Ethereum, which I think are just like a little slow, and I think with people running like um, Terminates and Abrupt Decays and John, that the Master of Ethereum is just like if you play the Etch Champion like we are, it has protection from the colors. It's much nicer to get those through with the cranial plating on them. But this deck is pretty straightforward. I really like this deck. I haven't played with it at all, but I've played against it more times than I can count because I've actually just never piloted it. But the versions that I've always liked the most are the ones that use the burn, because it just like having a Shrapnel Blast and a Galvanic Blast in hand is such good reach. But it
I agree. Like the versions that run Thoughtcast and Ethereum and Tempered Steel and stuff, is just like way too dirtly reliant on other cards just doing work already. Like this deck just wants to be like being as aggressive as possible and just dumping its hand quicker than the opponent.
Yeah, it's all in. It's like the Infect deck that we talked about.
Right, but it attacks at a different angle, which is interesting.
Right, absolutely. The I don't think this deck is ever going to be a bad deck either. I think that people will be playing like if you bought into Affinity, you'd be able to play this deck pretty much for the rest of Modern, you know.
Right.
But
Especially with its version, because this version is very generically good in like most meta games.
right, I like this deck a lot. The main deck Etch Champions, a lot of people have been sideboarding those in the list that I've been seeing, and I don't know like why they bring them in, because it's like it's good against pretty much everything out there, and it's awesome with the cranial plating. Like I know some people have been playing like Steel Shaper's Gifts or whatever to dig up the cranial plating, which is totally fine. But yeah, just like Edge Champion with the plating on him is nasty. Like, what do they do about that?
Right.
You can't block
Like
it.
it definitely not. Like I really like the Edge Champion in this list, especially because it's much more aggressive than the other lists. Just such a hard threat to deal with, and like you said, the plating makes it a monster.
Or the Arcbound Ravager. I mean, you can just sack all your artifacts to Arcbound Ravager and put it all in the Edge Champion and not be scared that they have anything. I mean, like, the only colorless removal is, like, Karn and Wormcoil, and that's one deck.
Right.
I mean, they could, like, Cryptic Tap it or something like that, but there's not a lot of ways to interact with the Edge Champion.
Yeah, not a lot of people playing Damnation.
No. No, they are not. Or, I don't know, Supreme Verdict might be seeing. The uncounterable clause is kind of nice.
Maybe, but no one's really experimented with that in modern yet. So
I don't know.
even then, it's still fine.
I've seen people trying to make like variants of like blue white, kind of like control and stuff like that, and even like the mono blue fairies deck that you had, which I know you weren't like serious about or anything, but what we messed around with. And fairies is actually a fine deck, but
Right. It's just like two meta games behind the.
it is, and that's why it's not even in our top 10 list or anything. But uh, I don't know. It's we can talk about the sideboard a little bit. I don't really know honestly what to sideboard in Affinity. Whenever I play a deck like this, and same thing with the Infect deck, like you really are all in. Like when you go to game two, like you're really just hoping to win game one off a surprise. Like hope you win the die roll or just be faster than, hope they have some dead cards in their deck or they just weren't ready for it. And then games two and three are much more of a fight for you because they're going to be siding in like a play set of Ancient Grudges and stuff like that. But like you have some interactions with like Storm, and then like I thought like the idea of like playing some counter spells might be nice instead of like the Shrapnel Blast, or if like you're trying to play against another control deck or something like that and you don't want this to get spell snared, because that's pretty bad to get spell snared.
Yeah, it would hurt a lot. But they're probably going to save the spell stay for the plating because the Shrapnel Blast is going to the face for lethal anyway.
Well, I mean, I don't know
That's still tempting.
if I got a blue
But
open and they
to your
cast a
original statement, like I actually really agree. Like whenever I build like these all-in aggro decks or combo decks, it's very hard to sideboard because you have to figure out like what hurts you a lot, and you have to figure out how many slots you can afford to take out. Like it's very difficult to sideboard out. Like this sideboard's not correct by any standpoint, but it's a good direction, I think.
it's a good start. Like if you were just wanted to build a deck for a modern, like Grand Prix trial or something like that, like you could build this and it'd be fine.
Yeah, like a non-GP or higher modern event.
Yeah, I actually, did you know that they're making modern a F&M format now?
Yeah, I heard that. I was actually pretty excited, but I don't think my local store would ever like choose to run it over standard because standard's much more popular.
Yeah, I mean I agree with you now, but I think maybe when they release Modern Masters, like people have more access. I honestly do hope. I own a lot of cards in Modern that are going to lose a lot of value to Modern Masters, but I'd rather see more people playing the format than have my Goifs be like 100 instead of 75. You know?
Right, like rather actually use them than have them gathering dust. I agree.
Right, totally. Like when everyone's playing it, like that's why Standard right now is really fun because you can go to tournaments even in states or places where Magic isn't really popular and still get Pro Tour qualifiers that have like 150 people,
Right.
So I think that's cool. But you talk about like modern, like much less people are into modern just because you look at most modern decks and the first like 12 cards you see are like $300.
Yeah, it feels like people are forced to play it rather than choose to play it, which is sad. But I really want it to come to the point where people experience the format enough and just want to play it every week.
Yeah, I I've always wanted to play this this deck because I never really get a chance to play it all in aggro because I always want to go bigger than that. I always try to play the late game decks rather than the aggro decks. I've never been much of an aggro
Or,
player, but
or the aggro control decks, which are just much more interactive with your opponent.
yeah. Well, this deck's so sweet though. Like
Yeah, this deck's definitely
it's
good.
a very cool, unique deck that's not overpowered by any means, but not underpowered either.
It's competitive.
Totally. Arcbound Ravager is also just like one of my favorite cards. I mean I've never won a game with him because I will probably never play with him, but every single time my opponent plays an Arcbound Ravager, it's just so awkward because you can't like burn him because they like sack you can't like bolt him or whatever because they just sack a bunch of things, or even if they go to like path it, they just like sack a bunch of things and make their Etch Champion huge, or they activate their Ink Moth Nexus and make it like a 7/7.
Right, it's like the most annoying card to see like turn 4 once they already slammed a few dudes. Like, it's nice when you catch them with their pants down and they turn to it or something like that.
Yeah, and they just sack all their completely irrelevant things, like their Mox Opals and Ornithopters and whatever, or just like creatures that aren't doing anything anymore, like Memnite, if it's just stuck behind a Goyf or whatever.
Yeah, Moxop was a very good example, actually, because the legendary. Even the lands like Darksteel Citadel, you just like pitch excess mana into it, so when you get flooded.
Right. But yeah, this sideboard isn't exciting by any means. Aethersworn Canonist you kind of have for combo. I don't even know why. I mean, obviously to kill enchantments, but um, I don't know like when you would side that card in.
I don't know, like, we just got that card from some list, right?
Yeah, I think most of this list we just copied and then we kind of made some minor adjustments because it had like Thoughtseize in it, and we're like, why would you want Thoughtseize?
Right, just play a different angle.
Yeah, just Galvanic Blast him turn one if it's that bad. uh, but one of the cool things is like with sideboarding, you have access to Glimmervoid, and you certainly can be playing 2 to 4 of these if you want to cut back on something else, or even add another land. I actually cut a land out of the deck list that we saw. It was 16 originally, but he was only playing 3 Mox Opals, so which seems wrong. So
Right.
the Mox Opal allows you for like the nut curves.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's pretty easy to get rid of, what's it called? Bad ones, especially with the Shrapnel Blast and the Ravagers.
Right, and with between the Glimmer Void and the Mox Opal and your Springleaf Drums, you can really play any colored sideboard card you want to, as long as it's just like a single color.
Oh, for sure.
So that's another reason why this sideboard it's totally not developed at all, because there's so many different things you could be playing. But yeah, anything else, Sasha? I think that's about covers
Yeah,
it.
pretty sure we covered most of it. Like, I love the plating with the Edge Champion in this deck. It's just such another awesome angle to attack. And the Shrapnel Blast is just a big game as well.
5 damage is so much.
Yeah, we should run Snapcaster in this deck.
Yeah, that's what we should be doing.
Yeah.
All right. Well,